Well, hello. This is Michael. I am continuing my work on this RCA 811K. Chassis is done pretty much underneath. Just about everything, just panning around just so you can get an idea what it looks like. It doesn't look a lot different except there's a lot more clean wires in there and so forth. There's going to be an occasional wire because I'm doing stuff on the top side now that will extend down. So I've gotten that stuff done. And I'm going to get to work on the top side. Let me show you what I have going on here. I have decided that I need to replace these wiring harnesses. These things are in rough shape and they need to be replaced. They don't look bad. I mean, the wires look good, and it's sad to see those wires go away. But if you look at them really close and you do this, you see what happens. That insulation is too dry and it cracks easily. And you know that as I'm manipulating these wires to reinstall everything, this is going to crack in places, and I don't want that. You know, there's maybe not high voltage going through these, but it doesn't matter. They need to be right. So as good as they look, and as sad as it is, they all have to be replaced. That means this whole harness here, as you can see, coming through there, it comes over this side to this preset. All this needs to be disconnected and removed from the radio. And all these are the fingers for the other side preset. All this stuff has to be removed. And then these wires one by one replaced. If I try to replace them all in one big bunch, they'll get messed up. I've done it. I've done this enough times to know that you do one wire at a time, you're okay, and then you bundle them. And I like to bundle them the way they did back in the old days. It won't look exactly like this. You can't get that cloth material anyway. I've never seen it anywhere. So I do it like a lot of radios did back then, and I use cotton cord to bind the wires together, and you basically tie them together with a cord about every 4 inches. You wrap a loop around and you pull it tight, and you just keep doing that until you get to the end. And most of the Zeniths, that's how they were set up anyway. The RCAs, they use this cloth tubing, but you can't find this anywhere that I know of. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. That's real tedious work. It's going to take me hours and hours and hours. So maybe not just to do these harnesses, but to do some of this other wiring. But then once I get all that wiring in place, where I know all of that is right, then I can start to work on the motor and getting the motor and the clockwork for the tuning set up so that that works properly. I really don't want to have the motor and tuning stuff set up until this is right, because there's no point. I won't be able to test it anyway. So I'll get started on this and I'll show you my progress. The RCA is right side up now, and I'm going to begin working on the top side. Funny, without all of that tuner nonsense in the way, it actually doesn't look that complicated. One of the first things I'm going to do is to remove this harness and begin to build a new harness. So that's going to be my first task at hand. Now, one thing you'll notice about this harness here is the material that is used for, I'll call it the carcass, kind of like the carcass on a tire. This is basically like a cloth, and it may be impregnated with something that's hard to tell, but it's basically a cloth tube. I don't know where I can find stuff like that. So it's not something that I'm likely to see, down at the local Walmart. So what am I going to do about that? Well, the best thing I've been able to come up with is I take some cotton, like cord, like string, really strong cotton string. And I do like the Zenith radios do, and I make loops, and I'll run loops that are connected together about every 4 inches. That holds all the cords together. It looks vintagey, and it does a real nice job of maintaining the flexibility of the wire. See, this wire is not very flexible because the wire inside has got brittle insulation. But it would be flexible. When it was new, it was flexible. That's why they set it up this way. So I'm not going to be able to mimic this cord. That's a bummer. I don't know what else to do, but I can still make it look old and do what a lot of radio manufacturers did with that loop method. As I go through this, as I build the harness, I'm going to build it along with these contacts for the radio tuning. So this part right here, these are the fingers, okay? These are the fingers for the, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I knew that didn't seem right. This is the left-hand side when you're looking at the radio faceplate on. The left-hand side push button contact fingers, okay? And then these are the preset stop fingers. These are what ride on the bottom of that disc. And the way that disc works, it's a continuous piece of copper, except that there is a break in the copper at a certain point that they've filled with nylon material so it won't get caught there, but that it breaks the electrical contact. So these fingers ride and they allow current to the motor until it reaches that break in the contact on the disc and stops the motor at that point. Pretty rudimentary method, but it works really well. So what I'm gonna do is, as I build this harness, I'll do it one at a time. I'm going to build the harness separately while I'm looking at this. One at a time, I will desolder the wire from the terminal. I'll clean the terminal up, and then I'll solder a new wire to it, and I'll make it the length that I need to run along this harness. Okay, and I'll do that one at a time. That's the best way I know of to avoid making any mistakes. When it's all done, then I'll bind them all together with that cord like I mentioned, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's all done. So I want to remove this from the radio. So there's just a 1/4-inch screw and basically like a conduit clamp holding it onto the chassis. So I don't need to remove that clamp. I just loosen it, no big deal. Here's my nut driver, turn that the 1/4-inch screw a few times. Geez, I bet that's never been loosened before. It was tight. Okay, now I can lift this whole harness off of the radio, and I can take it, set it aside, and work on it someplace else, which is what I'm going to do. I will begin building this harness. I'll show you my progress as I go. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick and dirty way to make wires with tracer. And this is a way I use a lot. You do what you want to. This works really well for me. It doesn't result in perfect wire doesn't result in wire that looks exactly like the original, but you know, finding a wire like that's going to be pretty damn hard anyway. So this does a nice job, and this will, if I use the right colors, this will enable me to use wire that is true to the schematic. So here we go. You see I've already done some of it. I'll show you how I do it. Real simple. About every centimeter or so, make a mark at an angle, about a 30-degree angle. Make a little mark. Doesn't have to be a perfect little mark. They don't have to be spaced exactly. You can get a ruler out if that's what you want to do, but nobody's going to notice. You're going to be the only one who knows. So you make a little mark. Okay, make a mark, make a mark, make a mark. This will get, you'll get tired of making marks, but there you go. You make a mark. Now you turn the wire. You're going to do this 4 times. You turn the wire 90 degrees. Now you try to see your the first mark while you make the second mark. Now you see how this mark goes off this way at a 30-degree angle. Now when you turn it 90 degrees, you want to go off this way at a 30-degree angle, like I've done right here. You can see what I've done right here. So here we go. Make a mark, make a mark, make a mark. You see how it's different angle than what's there? Make a mark, make a mark, make a mark. These Sharpies are wonderful. I don't know what they were originally designed for, but hobbyists love them. Make a mark, make a mark, make a mark. Just keep making these marks. Perfection is not your aim here, okay? You're aiming for a wire that looks good. You're aiming for a wire that is safe, and you're aiming for a wire that matches the schematic. Okay, so you see what we wind up with here is basically a wire that has like a tractor tire tread look to it, okay? You're going to do that all the way around. If you use your imagination, and if you glance at it, that kind of has a look of woven cloth, okay? Because that's how the tracer was made. It was different colored cloth woven into the cloth as it was being made for the insulation. Okay, so now we're going to turn it another 90 degrees and go back again to the first direction, the first angle. Make a mark in between. Make a mark in between. Remember, look at what you made the last time. Make a mark. Make a mark. You can make heavy marks. You can make narrow marks, whatever your preference is. I tend to make them a little bit bigger because on this RCA, they're kind of wide tracer. I've seen some tracer which is like 1 thread width, and I do them real thin for that with a ballpoint pen. But on this one, because they're thick, I use a Sharpie. It works the best. Okay, so here we are. Again, doesn't look super good close up, But you're not going to have anybody sticking their head in the back of this radio to study every wire in the chassis. You want it to look good. You want it to have curb appeal. What we're doing is giving it curb appeal, okay? I guarantee you the owner of this radio is going to dig this when it's all done. Make a mark, turn it to another 90 degrees, make a mark. Now, when you do the last set, you see how this set of marks is the same angle as this set of marks, right? This set right here is the same angle as that set. So what you do when you get to the last ones, you just kind of make it halfway, whatever angle you feel like. You're just filling in space at this point, okay? So you're going to keep making marks too. Now you've cut your wire to length first because you don't want to mark up your whole spool of wire and forget what you're doing. I've done that, by the way. I started making marks, and I must have enjoyed making marks. I was playing, I don't know, I think it was John from Arkansas on the YouTube. And I started making marks, and I'll be damned, I got through about half of a spool of this expensive cloth-covered wire before I realized, damn it, I only meant to make marks on about a foot of it. Sometimes you get going on stuff and you just forget what you're doing, and that's what I did that day. So I'm going to cut this wire off and keep it around and maybe have it for some little short piece I need. Now notice something. I'm going to get a little closer here. See the smudge? See the smudge there? I'm going to try and stay in frame. This is kind of tough, but if you see that smudge, there's a smudge there that happens when you're handling this thing after you make the marks, especially if you do them real fast. What I do, that smudge, there will also be smudges like that will form if you handle this wire a lot once you've done this and you've installed it in the radio. So what I've learned to do is I take maybe a can of Mohawk, low gloss or satin lacquer, and I just dust this wire a couple times. Just dust it, let it dry, dust it again. You don't want to get it real wet because it'll make this ink bleed and look bad. So you dust it, and then you dust it a second time. That'll be enough to keep you from smudging the wire without making the wire brittle or cracking or lacquer flaking off. So that works really well. Sometimes the smudging is good because when you do that, it makes the wire look a little old, especially when you're using a black or brown tracer color. It'll make the wire look old, and that kind of takes away that flashy new look that sometimes you really don't want in your radio. So it all depends on what you want, some ideas, that you might want to try. And give this a shot, practice it a little bit. I did this one quickly, but when I take my time and I work slowly, I can make a wire look pretty darn good. It does take some time, but it adds that little extra touch to the radio. And sometimes that's all you need to make the radio be the difference between good and outstanding. So anyway, give this a shot. Next up, we're going to build a wire harness.